In this video, we are talking about 10 players who will go nuclear in week 2 of fantasy football. And let's start with the guy who might shock you that he's on this list, but it's Zach Charbonnet. Kudos to you if you drafted Charbonnet because he is the main man in Seattle. At least he was in week 1. 58% snap rate, 54% of the rush attempts, 36% of the routes. He led the team with 4 red zone attempts. He was getting all the work. He was getting all the high-value touches, along with leading all running backs in rush success rate in week 1. Finished the day with 12 attempts for 47 yards, found the end zone, 10.7 fantasy points. Not a huge day, but in comparison to what Ken Walker did, it was very notable. We'll touch on Walker in a second, but it's clear at this point that Seattle loves Charbonnet. We heard it all summer. They were raving about him through all of training camp, talking about his knowledge, his work ethic, his reliability, and they are rewarding him now. You're seeing it all happen, and I think Charbonnet's role is going to only continue to grow. It would not shock me if he's a top 15 fantasy running back the rest of the way. And touching on Ken Walker, he was bad. He was bad in week 1. 10 attempts for 20 yards, 3 receptions for 4 yards. That's not good. That is very inefficient. He didn't break any tackles like he's notably known for doing. It was not very explosive. 5.4 fantasy points, and he was healthy. He was out there, but he just didn't look great. So not only was Charbonnet the guy in the backfield, but he just drastically outperformed him. And Charbonnet wasn't anything special. But like I said, that's just how bad Walker was. And the matchup is also really nice against the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, if you watched last week, Breece Hall went absolutely crazy on the ground, over 100 rushing yards against this defense who we thought was a solid run defense. Apparently not. If you're looking for a guy to throw in your flex or your RB2 spot, I think Charbonnet has a really big game. I think he solidifies himself as the dude in this Seattle backfield after week 2. Moving on to our next guy, Davante Adams at the Tennessee Titans. He didn't give you much in his season debut with the Rams. You were hoping for a bigger day. We all were, right? 4 receptions, 51 yards on 8 targets, 9.1 fantasy points. It was a Puka Nacua show in week 1. Not extremely shocking, but what's positive here is that Davante's target share, his efficiency was all there, which means that bigger days are ahead for the savvy veteran. He saw a 27% target share, 29% first read share, while ranking 10th in separation, 11th in route win rate. This is an older receiver at the ripe age of 32. It doesn't matter. Adams still has it. He still has a ton left in the tank. And what was kind of surprising in week 1 is that Davante saw a lot of Derek Stingley Jr., the stud corner for the Texans. He wasn't on Puka as much. So they're putting the number 1 corner on Adams. I don't know how long that's going to last because it's pretty evident at this point that Puka is the better receiver. So if defenses start rolling their number 1 corner onto Puka, which I think they're probably going to, that's going to free up Davante Adams, putting him in a lot of nice advantageous positions. We know Tennessee, who they're facing off against this week, has a pretty good number 1 corner in L'Jarius Sneed, who's been working his way back from injury. He had a good week of practice. He's probably going to play more in week 2. So if Puka sees a lot of Sneed in this one, I think Davante is going to eat. Regardless, I think this is still a beatable secondary. I think Adams finds the end zone in this one and has a much bigger day. Moving on to our next guy, we just kind of touched on him, Breece Hall. Facing off against the Bills this week, Breece the Beast is back. Breece Lightning is here to stay. He looks like 2022 vintage Hall. He has that explosiveness back. He's not in a messy running back by committee that everyone was thinking he was going to be in. He balled out last week. He deserves to be the workhorse on this Jets offense that looked really good under new offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand. 19 carries, 107 yards, 2 receptions, 38 yards, 5.6 yards per carry, 16.5 fantasy points. He went over 100 yards, which he only did 1 time last year. He's already done that in week 1. Like I said, he looks really good, and he gets another juicy matchup in week 2 against the Bills, who just let King Henry, Lamar Jackson run all over them. Henry had a $169, 2 touchdowns on Sunday night. No, Breece Hall is not Derrick Henry, but this Bills, yet again, don't have a good run defense, so I'm not really worried about it. And matters got even worse for them because stud defensive tackle Ed Oliver is going to be out in this one, dealing with an ankle injury after getting stepped on by a teammate in practice. So Arguably, their best run stuffer on the line is not going to be active on an already weak run defense. So yeah, Breece Hall is going to go crazy in this one. And he's beat up Buffalo over the course of his career as he went for 169 total yards against them last season and is averaging 15.5 fantasy points per game across 4 outings. I'm starting Breece with confidence, and he could be a big reason for why you win your matchup this week. On to our next guy, Jakobi Meyers. We talked about him in the start video for receivers a couple days ago. Face off against the Chargers. And I think he's going to go crazy because Brock Bowers is trending to not play in this game. Didn't practice Thursday, didn't practice Friday. Not looking great. It is a Monday night game, so Brock still has a chance to get in a practice. But regardless, I mean, Meyers looked great in week 1. Monster performance, 8 receptions, 97 yards on 10 targets, 17.7 fantasy points. It just seems like he has such a strong connection with Geno Smith already in this offense. He looks like he's going to be a really big part of this Chip Kelly offense, and they're using him out of the slot, which I think is a perfect spot for him. He ran 60% of his routes from the slot, getting those easy layup targets. And another little cool nugget is that Meyers led all receivers in week 1 in missed tackles forced. This dude is playing for a contract, and he's an older receiver, but he's playing really well. And he's been the wide receiver 12 in yards per game at 75 since Devontae Adams was traded away last year, ahead of guys like A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Brian Thomas Jr., and Jackson Smith-Njigba. And he also went off against his Chargers defense last year in week 18 for 9 receptions, 123 yards, and a touchdown on 10 targets. All in all, this is a really good receiver that you want in your starting lineup because I'm expecting the Raiders to be chasing points against the Chargers, who looked unstoppable on offense in week 1. And if they don't have Brock Bowers, it's going to be the Meyers show. They don't have much else in the passing game. We know rookie running back Ashton Genty is going to get a heavy dose on the ground, probably some involvement through the air as well. But if you have Meyers, you are starting him in this one. Moving on to our next guy, Jordan Mason gets the Atlanta Falcons this week. And I think the Vikings only won the game in week 1 because of Mason. They were really struggling in the first half with Aaron Jones. The second half, they started to feed Mason, and it really panned out. He saw 65% of the rush attempts, resulting in 16 touches, 75 total yards, 4.5 yards per carry. He had a nice 19-yard rush. He outsnapped Aaron Jones on the game, 30-28. And on top of that, he saw 100% of the snaps in the red zone. They want Mason to be the early down grinder, goal line back. He's going to score a ton of fantasy points, you guys, this year on a good Minnesota offense. It would not shock me at all if the Vikings end up turning to Mason as the workhorse sooner rather than later. He just looks a lot better than an older Aaron Jones. And he also has receiving ability to his game as well. Jordan Mason can be a workhorse on this Vikings offense. They don't really need Aaron Jones. I mean, Aaron Jones saved his day on that nice receiving touchdown, but if you take that touchdown away, he did next to nothing, 2.9 yards per carry. It was pretty evident who the better running back was on this roster. I think Mason is a smash start in this week. Even if the Falcons played pretty solid against the run in week 1, that was only one. That's a small sample size, right? It's kind of hard to gauge what teams are going to be better at stopping the run than others because we don't have a lot of data here. So Mason played really well. He earned a larger workload, and I think he's going to have a solid performance in week 2. Moving on to our next guy, Tyreek Hill. It wasn't great in week 1. It was actually pretty bad. This whole Miami offense was pretty bad. Devon Achane was the only one that was okay for fantasy, but 4 receptions, 40 yards for Hill, 8 fantasy points. This Miami team was getting absolutely crushed by the Indianapolis Colts, led by Daniel Jones. Who would have thought? I think that tells us how bad this team as a whole is. But the Dolphins ended up pulling their starters in the 4th quarter, which didn't allow Hill to rack up any of those nice garbage time fantasy points. So he didn't play a full game. All right, we'll give him a break there. But he was still seeing nice volume on this offense, 27% target share, 30% first read share, 48% of the air yard share. Miami is clearly still trying to get Hill the ball. They're going to continue to do so if they want to win football games. If Mike McDaniel does not want to get fired at some point, I'm expecting a bounce back performance in week 2. Again, it might feel gross, but the matchup is really nice against the Patriots, who will be without their stud corner in Christian Gonzalez for the 2nd straight week. And this is also a defense that allowed Geno Smith and company to go for over 362 yards through the air. And New England also allowed the 17th most fantasy points per target to perimeter receivers in week 1. it's not going to feel great, but you do have to start Hill. I think you can trust him in your lineup this week. I actually think you can feel pretty good about it. He's not going to do what he did in week 1. I'm guessing he goes over 100 yards in this one, whether you like it or not. On to our next guy, Javonte Williams. He wanted to let everyone know in week 1 that he's still here. Everyone thought that Williams' career was kind of over, but he proved to us that he's going to be solid because of the situation that he's in. He's in a really good Dallas offense. I don't think he was spectacular. He had 2 pretty easy touchdowns, 15 carries, 54 yards, 3.6 yards per carry. He's a product of this offense. Anytime you can get the RB1 on a really good offense, you take it because volume is king. And if he's going to continue to get these red zone carries, these easy touchdowns, then yeah, he's going to be very serviceable from a fantasy perspective. 20.4 fantasy points in week 1. He's the workhorse back on a high-powered Dallas offense that doesn't want Jaden Blue to see the field. Blue is looking to be inactive again, which is unfortunate for us on this channel because we love Jaden Blue. Keep him on your bench because he's going to be a thing at some point. But Williams is the guy for now. He saw 80% of the snaps in week 1, 68% of the rush attempts, 71% route participation. Like, Brian Schottenheimer wants to feed Javonte, and if you have him on your team, you love it. You're going to play him in week 2. Even though he was inefficient, he logged 0 explosive runs, 0 missed tackles forced, but he's an RB1 on a good offense that's seeing elite volume, so it really doesn't matter. And this Cowboys offensive line is looking really good. They ranked 2nd best in yards before contact per attempt, and I think Javonte has another solid outing against a bad New York Giants run defense that gave up 23.9 total fantasy points to the Washington running backs in week 2. Did you see what Washington did against Green Bay? They could not get anything done on the ground. I don't think it's a very good unit overall, but they ran all over the Giants. So yeah, I think Javonte is going to have another big day in week 2. Get him in your starting lineup. Feel good about it. Moving on to our next guy, Justin Fields. This is the year. He's doing it. Everything I've seen already, I bought in. I think he's going to be great in real life and in fantasy. He looks like an entirely different player in this new look Jets offense and really could be a league winner for fantasy if he keeps this up. As he was 16 of 22, 218 passing yards, threw a passing touchdown, 12 attempts, 48 rush yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 29.5 fantasy points in what was supposed to be a tough matchup against a good Pittsburgh Steelers defense. He was a quarterback 2 on the week in fantasy, and Fields looks like he's progressed as a passer. That's always been the biggest knock on Justin, is that he holds the ball too long. He doesn't know how to process through his reads. But in week 1, he looked like he improved in that area. 73% completion rate, 5 for 7 on passes of 10+ air yards, 3rd in yards per attempt, 5th in passer rating, 90.4 PFF passing grade. What? Like, if he keeps this up, he is going to be a top 3 quarterback in fantasy this year, and he gets another good matchup. I don't think Fields is going to have any issue running all over the Bills that just gave up 238 yards on the ground to Baltimore that we touched on earlier. And the Jets are also going to be likely chasing points in this one against a good Buffalo Bills team. They're probably going to be down early, so Fields is going to have to get it done on the ground and through the air. I think he's going to put up another top 5 finish at the position in week 2. Get him in your lineup, and he looks primed to go off again. Moving on to our next guy, George Pickens. He didn't have the best debut for the Dallas Cowboys after lighting it up all of training camp, looking poised for a breakout season. He let you down. I don't think it's time to panic yet on the ultra-talented receiver, but you don't love 3 receptions for 30 yards, 11.8% target share. Not great, but I think he is going to be okay considering Dak only threw for 188 yards in week 1. That's going to change. Lamb also didn't come through for him. He had 4 drops. CD kind of lost the game for the Cowboys, unfortunately, so I don't know if Dak's going to realize that, hey, I got Pickens. We have another wide receiver too. It's not just Lamb in this offense this year. George Pickens is a very capable receiver, and he led all Dallas receivers in route participation in week 1. He tied Lamb with the 91.1% snap rate. Dak looked really good. He looked aggressive with his throws. He looked really sharp. He looked the best I've ever seen as of late. This offensive line that we touched on also appears to be a top 5, top 10 unit. And if you give Dak time, I think he is a really good quarterback in this league. More opportunities are coming for Pickens, especially those downfield targets. We know that is George's specialty. And Pickens didn't have the best luck in week 1, matching up against a really good corner for the Eagles and Quinyon Mitchell, who should have been on Lamb, but he was kind of sticking with Pickens on the outside, which totally makes sense. But in week 2, a much easier secondary against the Giants that allowed the 10th most PPR points per target to perimeter receivers last week. And if you have Pickens, don't bench him, please. He's one of those guys that can rack up a ton of fantasy points in one play, one deep 50-yard touchdown, which I think is coming this week. And on to our last guy, TreVeyon Henderson, another player that was pretty disappointing in week 1, but you have to give him another shot. Keep him in your starting lineup this week. He only saw 38% of the snaps and finished with 11 touches for 51 yards, though. He didn't get a ton of work, kind of similar to RJ Harvey. They didn't give him a ton of work, but he produced on what they gave him. 5.4 yards per carry. He was involved in the passing game, which we love for fantasy, especially PPR leagues. 6 receptions, 24 yards on 6 targets. I'm expecting this role to grow for Henderson. The head coach, the coaching staff has already hinted at that happening as soon as this week. Why? Because he's really good and Ramondre Stevenson is not. Stevenson had 7 carries for 15 yards last week, 2.1 yards per carry, and New England lost their first game. So they would be stupid to not utilize one of their most explosive players. And the matchup is great against Miami, who we talked about earlier, is just a train wreck on both sides of the ball. They allowed 156 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns to the Colts last week. Jonathan Taylor had a strong performance. TreVeyon is also a guy, he's like a Jahmyr Gibbs-esque. He can pick up chunk plays. He's not going to see 25 touches in any game, right? Most likely, but he doesn't need to. He's like a Devon Achane his rookie year. Give him 11 to 15, 18 touches, and he could explode for a huge fantasy day. I think he has tremendous upside this week. I'm expecting more volume. So if you pair the talent, the upside, the explosiveness in a really good matchup, yeah, you have to keep Henderson in your lineup. Even though week 1 was not great, especially with rookies, we all like to see it, right? You might have that mindset of, oh, I'm just going to set him down on the bench, wait for that big day, and then put him in. Don't do that. Put him in this week and reap the benefits of a monster fantasy day. Some honorable mentions for you, some other guys that I think need to be started this week. James Conner, I think, has a huge day in a really easy matchup. Hollywood Brown's going to be the guy through the air for Kansas City. Travis Etienne, I think he stays hot. And Tyler Warren, tight end rookie for the Colts, is looking like the wide receiver one on this offense. This offense runs through Warren in the passing game. So get all those guys in your lineup. Feel really good about it. That's all I have for you guys today. I really appreciate you guys making it this far, tuning in, showing your love and support. It really means a lot to me. Let's get a W this Sunday, and I'll see you in the next one.